This is going to be talk about Ionic, kind of the missing SDK for the hybrid apps. A little bit about myself. I am a developer advocate for Ionic. You can find me on Twitter, GitHub, anywhere on the internet. And these first few slides, I'm going to kind of go through them pretty quickly. So you want a native app, but we all know the downsides of that. You have to be able to write great code for iOS, Android, Windows, and you have to maintain it, and it's just a really expensive process. It's 2014, why are we still doing this? I don't know if you guys have heard, but there is this alternative platform that you can do. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Cordova, or PhoneGap, or PhoneGap, then Cordova with PhoneGap. So we all obviously know what this is, and if you haven't heard of it, it's pretty sweet. But some people don't think the web is great. Glad you have $1 billion. But you kind of have to look at it and think, okay, are you a Facebook company? Are you, a multi-million-dollar industry where your app needs to be the best performance that it can have on all the platforms? You should do it native. It's just, the simple case. But if you look at any app store today, you're seeing apps that's not necessarily the case. You can get away with using hybrid technologies and still have a great app. People complain, hybrid apps are slow. Not really the case anymore. If we look at mobile devices, this is just the iPhone. From the iPhone 4 to even the iPhone 6 right now, it's improved incredibly. It's how much RAM does it have, it's better processors, and it's only going to get better. And our web standards are actually catching up to what we expect them to be. I just found out recently, you don't actually need to put a Mozilla prefix for border radius on Firefox. So something as little as that is great. And if we're worrying about all these different software versions, iOS right now, it's kind of 50-50 between iOS 8 and iOS 7, which are still really good versions, and then the 5 people who have iOS 6 and below. Android, it's a little bit of a different story, but we're looking mostly at 4.0 and up, and the small group of people who still have 2.3, unfortunately. So we can kind of say that the web's caught up, but we don't have the great tooling that native developers have. They have these great SDKs where multi-touch gestures, navigation stacks, animations. That's all given to them right off the bat. You don't have to write a lot of code to get a great app if you're developing for iOS or Android. I just want to give credit to actually Tommy. That is, it's a really good explanation of what it's like. Yeah, you have to go through a lot of challenges for a native app, but you do get a better polished product. Web doesn't really have the tools that native does, so you get a crappy little house. So yeah, it's the Wild West for the web right now. There's no unified structure of getting animations, gesture support. We have Twitter Bootstrap, but you throw that on a phone and it's not going to work. Different UIs. And we need something more than just jQuery plugins, because jQuery just doesn't cut it. And that's kind of the motivation behind Ionic. It's built on web standards that you know and love. And we kind of decided that we wanted to, instead of reinventing the wheel, work with some frameworks that handle a lot of the navigation, structuring of code. And this chart kind of shows you which one we decided to go out with. So we're standing on the shoulders of Angularjs, because it's been proven to work for desktop. It extends HTML's vocabulary with reusable directives and injectable services. And it provides this great structure for separating your concerns between controllers, which handle all your logic, their views, which are just HTML markup. So it's nothing that it's not like you're having to relearn this whole new way of thinking. It's it's a very intuitive way of looking at apps. It's natively focused, which is really important. We're not looking to make another Twitter Bootstrap. The world does not need another Twitter Bootstrap. And we're focusing on mobile apps, not mobile websites. So kind of a little caveat to it. But we're being very performance driven about it. We're using a lot of hardware accelerated animations. We're not really messing with the DOM too much when we don't have to. And we're removing that 300 millisecond tap delay that WebKit has. We have where you can just use on-click event handlers and not have to worry about events firing twice or making sure that you're switching from on-click for desktop to on-touch for mobile, and it just works. And at the end of the day, it's really just plain old CSS. There's no magic to it, but that CSS is actually being written through Sass. It was kind of the best solution that we thought. So we can actually generate a whole Sass file, Sass style sheet, and you can even customize it with all these custom variables and mix-ins. So that way, when you have your own product, you can theme it to fit your brand. And that's kind of something that we really encourage people to do instead of just going with the defaults that you get out of the box. So kind of think about how it all comes together is Ionic is really just the UI, and Angular is the logic behind everything. Cordova or PhoneGap handles that bridge between the web view and the native APIs. A little bit about our adoption. It's not like this is some kind of pet project in someone's garage that they're working on. It's actually gotten a lot of traction, which we really love. It's kind of blown up. So we're averaging around like 3,000 downloads a day from our CLI on NPM. And we have about 120,000 apps actually being started with our CLI tooling. And we're hoping to get our 1.0 actually out before the end of November. So this is kind of just a little bit of an overview of some of our components. So we have this really awesome one, which is called Collection Repeat. So basically, if you guys are familiar with anything with iOS, they have UI collection view. And that's basically where we took a lot of inspiration with. So we're only going to render about 10 items or whatever fits into the view. And then as you start to scroll a little bit, it'll start transitioning the items out of the view, update their information, and then reinsert them back in the correct position. So if you look at the code, it's really straight Angular. You define what you want to iterate over, and then you can set up the Angular data bindings. And in this specific example, we have 3,000 elements, and I don't feel like I need to scroll to illustrate that. This is silky smooth. And another little thing, we're doing the taps on the header bar to scroll back up. Navigation is something that's really important. Think about it. Again, native developers get that right out of the box, and hybrid app people have to recreate this. So we decided that to set up this thing called an Ion Navbar, where as you change your views, it's automatically going to update that title, inject a new back button, and it's going to read your history, figure out is there something in the previous history log, and all right, there is. Let's go back. It's really smooth animations, mimicking a lot of stuff. Right now, this is just doing the defaults for iOS, but you can see how smooth the animations are, fading out the old page and bringing in the new page. It's really smooth. And again, this is the markup that you're using. Just defining a back button and a nav bar and the entire view where all your transitions are going to happen. So that kind of brings us to tabs, where it's following that same concept where you can have a unified navigation bar, a header bar, but you can actually create these individual navigation views in tabs. Looking at the markup, each one is its own independent view that you don't have to worry about managing which one, where it is in between each tab. So if I go here and I want to go to this next page, but then I want to switch to the next tab, it's automatically going to update, realize I'm on a different tab. I don't need the back button. And then I go to this page, but then I want to go back. It's already going to maintain where I was in that previous tab session. And that's just given right out of the box. Side menu is one that I really, really like. It's kind of what sold me on Ionic. It's as simple as that. One-to-one gesture recognition for the side menus. If you click inside something, you can actually have your whole navigation view in the main content. Have your little hamburger icon. And all the history is maintained. And again, if you're looking at this this markup, it's super clear, and you're not guessing, well, what does this component do? What does this do? You understand because it's really declarative, which is one of the big wins with using Angularjs. This is an example of a service that we have where we can inject some elements into the DOM. Action sheet. We saw a really good example of a native action sheet. I hope this one can kind of compare. It's really smooth animation. You're not having to rely on an external plugin, and you can still bind to all these bind functionality to all these buttons that you define. It's really simple to say I want to have 2 buttons in here. I want to have one that is kind of a destructive, so it gets that red coloring, and then I want to have a cancel button. And they're all separated out, so that way the ones that provide the functionality that you want are grouped together. Delete is kind of grouped by itself, and so is cancel. And again, it handles those animations right out of the box. And a popover is one that we recently added. It was really requested, and we're doing some really specific stuff for platforms. So if you're on iOS, it's going to look one way. If you're on Android, it's going to look another way. And basically all we do is we pass in a template for it where we define a popover view, a navbar, and some content. So this will be the iOS one. It automatically dims out the background. We're still getting that momentum scrolling. If we go to Android, we have a very Android material design inspired popover. But if we're on like a desktop where it doesn't really matter, we have our own Ionic branded one. And it's just kind of like a nice default design for it. And then pull to refresh. We're using a JavaScript-based scrolling right now because scrolling on the web still sucks. Can't get really good scroll events. So we're doing our own scroller where we can actually tap into things like pull refresh and infinite scroll. In this example, we can just define what we want to do on refresh and define some of the text, the icon, and then automatically just pull down. It'll refresh and push a new item into the DOM. It's really fun to just mess around with this. And again, something to look at that is that's just one component, and it just sits in your DOM. You don't have to worry about maintaining the icons and switching them out. It's all given to you right out of the box. And that's something that we kind of want to iterate over is, all this functionality, it's really like an SDK. And to help get started with this, we actually created our own CLI tool. We based it off of Cordova. So we can actually get started creating a project, passing in templates, whether or not you want a side menu template, tabs, or just like a blank starter. And we can just automatically just start scaffolding out a decent project structure. We also include some build tools in it, like Gulp, Sass, and Bower. We went with Gulp over Grunt because if you've ever looked at a Grunt file, it's hell. So Gulp actually made sense for us. And we have a live reload for browser and devices. So if you wanted to actually emulate directly onto an iOS device, you can just say Ionic run iOS -L to give it a live reload flag, and it'll automatically do live reloads on your device. It does need, for Android, it's only supported on 4.4 because Android has doesn't have anything other than that, doesn't have WebSockets. So that's how we're kind of doing that. And we also have functionality where you can update the local libraries. If you're using 1.0 and then you want to update to 1.1, we make it really easy for you to just run a simple command and update that. And it's using Bower underneath, so you can still run Bower update and get the same functionality. And again, we still have abilities to tap into Cordova's functionality and create these native builds. And it's really difficult to get started with this. npm install Ionic and make that global, and install Cordova at the same time. We're going to start a project, Ionic Start. This one's going to be called My App, and we're going to be passing in a template for side menus. We're going to cd into that directory, and then hit Ionic serve. It's really difficult to get started, but we think that you'll be able to manage. And something that's really great, and why we decided to go with Angular, is it really lends itself to being testable. It's one of Angular's big wins, and you don't have to learn a whole new setup of how to test your app. If you know how to test an Angular web app, you can do that with an Ionic app. If we're using things like Karma and Protractor, and cover all your bases. It's MIT license. It's free. Even if you want to charge for an app, if you would like to buy us a beer, we actually like that even better than money. And it's really community driven. I kind of started off in the community really early on in their forums, just picking up questions, joined the team, and I still spend a lot of time hanging out in their forums on IRC, and it's a really active community. It's something that we really hope that we keep as we go on. And if any of that was whatever to you guys, we have an icon set. Over 600 of them. We kind of have them split up into 3 different sections. One for an Ionic, platform agnostic brand, an iOS brand, and an Android. So when you target iOS and Android, you can switch those icons out and get whatever is more visually native for that platform. So that way you're not seeing an iOS search icon on Android. It's really easy to get started. We have a great Learn site where you can see a lot of tutorials, videos, and kind of just like formulas for, say you want to do this functionality, how would you go ahead and do that? We have an awesome community, and we encourage people to make issues, make pull requests. Even if you're just fixing a typo, make a pull request. And with that, find me on Twitter. This is where my slides are. If you want to follow me today and then unfollow me on Monday, it's going to be great entertainment for everyone because you'll just see see me crumble.
Wow, awesome. We're really stoked on Ionic, so give Mike a big hand. They built this stuff properly. It's all totally interchangeable with Cordova and the PhoneGap CLI, and it's smooth. I think we have time for like a question or two if you guys have. Yeah.
Yep. So basically, we're wondering if we have support for tablets and if we're just phones. We do have support for tablets. We have a couple of cases where on our modal example, if you're on a tablet, it'll actually resize and scale appropriately. We also have a couple attributes that you can add to our side menus, where if you're at a larger screen, it'll just keep that side menu open and act as that master detail view that you get with iOS. And again, it's still a web view, so you can use media queries to change everything depending on what size you're at. Right.
What happens if you put it on a watch?
Why would you ask that?
We don't know. We don't know.
We don't know yet. We don't have a watch to test, so if you want to give us one.
Oh, there we go. That's the right thing. Oh, Steve.
Yeah, we actually plan post 1.0 to support Firefox and do some Windows Phone support. Firefox is, it's a big win for, I like that one. Windows Phone, it's really a tough story right now. We kind of have some support for it, but there's still some things that we need to go back and fix after we get everything finalized in the framework. Any more questions? Yes. We kind of are very opinionated towards Angular. If you've ever used anything with Angular, you know how great it is. It can be great. I mean, that's why we're opinionated about it. But again, CSS and style sheets are all separated out. So if you want to go ahead and use another JavaScript framework, you can, and just use the CSS. But you're kind of missing some of the magic that Angular has.
Go for it, yeah.
You can use CoffeeScript if you want. No, really, we're not really saying how, we're not telling you how to write your JavaScript per se. If you want to use CoffeeScript, go ahead. So.
Cool, thanks a lot, Mike. Give it up for Mike and Ionic.